An hour behind closed doors. That's all it took, no cameras, no photos, no official word from the palace. Just a father, a son, and 2 grandchildren he hadn't seen in years. For a few days, it looked like Prince Harry and King Charles had actually pulled off the impossible, a completely silent royal reunion. Then the details started leaking out anyway, and what came next tells you everything about why this family still can't quite trust each other. This is the story of the secret meeting that wasn't supposed to leak. An hour. That's how long it lasted. 1 hour, behind the gates of a private country house in Gloucestershire, a father sat down with the son he hadn't properly seen in years. No cameras. No statement. No photographs. Buckingham Palace confirmed only that a meeting had taken place, and then said absolutely nothing else. For a few days, it looked like the 2 sides had actually pulled off the impossible, a completely silent royal reunion. Then the details started leaking out anyway. Today, we're unpacking what really happened behind closed doors between King Charles and Prince Harry, the reunion that was supposed to be the most secret meeting in the royal family's recent history, and why the way it leaked might be more revealing than the meeting itself. If you followed the House of Windsor for any length of time, you'll know that with this family, silence is a language all its own. What isn't said often matters more than what is. And in the summer of 2025, the silence around a private meeting at Highgrove House spoke volumes, right up until it didn't. Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex, had just spent several days back in the country he once called home, marking 1 year to go until Birmingham hosts the Invictus Games, the international sporting event for wounded, injured, and sick servicemen and women that Harry founded back in 2014. It's the one truly universally admired legacy he carries from his old royal life, and it was, by every account, a triumphant few days for him. But sitting quietly underneath the good headlines was something far more sensitive, the first reported reunion in years between Harry, his wife Meghan, their 2 children, and King Charles. And in the days that followed, that reunion became a story of its own, a story about trust, about leaks, and about whether reconciliation is even possible when almost nothing about this family ever stays private for long. To understand why this single hour-long meeting matters so much, we need to rewind, not just through this one trip, but through the years of estrangement that led up to it. Let's go back to January 2020. That's when Harry and Meghan announced they were stepping back as senior working royals, in a move the tabloids quickly branded Megxit. What followed was one of the most dramatic ruptures the modern monarchy has ever seen, a relocation to North America, a tell-all Oprah Winfrey interview, a Netflix docuseries, and Harry's own memoir, Spare, which laid bare private family disagreements in a way no royal had ever done before. For the family left behind in Britain, the fallout was profound. Prince William, once famously close to his younger brother, has reportedly remained deeply hurt, not just by the general critique of the institution, but by claims that touched on his wife, Catherine, the Princess of Wales. Royal watchers have long suggested that of all the wounds from this saga, the ones involving Catherine cut the deepest for William, and that his anger has proven far harder to set aside than his father's. King Charles, meanwhile, has taken a different approach. Even while dealing with his own cancer diagnosis, revealed to the public in early 2024, Charles has periodically made room for his younger son. There have been brief visits, short meetings, moments of what looked like a door left slightly ajar. But nothing resembling a full reconciliation. And crucially, nothing involving Meghan or the 2 grandchildren the king has barely had the chance to know, Prince Archie and Princess Lilibet. That's what makes the summer of 2025 different. This wasn't just Harry ducking in for a brief, solo audience with his father. This was, if the reports are accurate, the whole family. Meghan included. The children included. For the first time in years. And it happened while Harry was in the country for something entirely separate, a joyful, very public celebration of the Invictus Games. Harry's UK visit didn't open on a high note. Just as he touched down, a High Court judge delivered a verdict in one of the most significant legal battles of Harry's post-royal life, his privacy case against Associated Newspapers, the publisher behind the Daily Mail and the Mail on Sunday. This wasn't a small case. Harry had joined 6 other prominent figures, including Sir Elton John, his husband David Furnish, actress Elizabeth Hurley, and anti-racism campaigner Baroness Doreen Lawrence in alleging that journalists working for the publisher had used unlawful methods to gather private information, including phone interception and deceptive tactics to obtain confidential records. The legal fight had dragged on for years and reportedly carried a combined price tag approaching £50 million once both sides' costs were accounted for. The judge, Mr. Justice Nick Lynn, delivered a ruling running to hundreds of pages, and it did not go Harry's way. The court found that the claimants had failed to prove the publisher's journalists had done anything unlawful, rejecting the argument that private information appearing in print, without a clear explanation for its source, automatically meant it had been obtained illegally. In the judge's own reasoning, suspicion, however understandable, simply wasn't enough. Harry's response was blunt. In a joint statement with Baroness Lawrence, he called the outcome a complete and total whitewash. Executives at the publisher, by contrast, hailed it as total vindication, with the paper's former longtime editor describing it as a victory for journalism itself. It was, by any measure, a brutal way to start a homecoming. A defeat this size, against an opponent Harry has spent years publicly battling, doesn't just cost money, it costs momentum. And Harry arrived on British soil already on the back foot. The comeback, wheelchair rugby, goats, and Alison Hammond. And yet, within days, the narrative shifted entirely. Harry threw himself into a jam-packed schedule of solo engagements to mark the one-year countdown to the Invictus Games in Birmingham. At an event at the National Exhibition Centre, he competed in an exhibition wheelchair rugby match and took part in a pickleball demonstration, throwing himself into the competitive spirit with the kind of unguarded enthusiasm that used to define his public image years ago. Cameras caught him laughing, sprinting, celebrating, at one point sharing a warm, spontaneous hug with television presenter Alison Hammond, a moment that instantly went viral. For a few days, it genuinely looked like the old Harry, the cheeky, approachable prince who could win over a room without trying, had reappeared. Then came, arguably, the most talked-about moment of the entire trip, goat yoga. At a summer festival for the military bereavement charity Scotty's Little Soldiers, held at Maxstoke Castle in Warwickshire, Harry joined a class combining yoga poses with a pen full of freely roaming nanny goats and their kids. Participants were encouraged to hold poses like downward goat instead of downward dog, and to mimic the animal's sounds to, in the words of the instructors, channel their spirit. It went about as smoothly as you'd expect. While lying on a mat surrounded by curious goats, one of the animals took a rather direct interest in Harry, stepping squarely on a rather sensitive part of his anatomy. Harry yelped, burst out laughing, and asked the culprit, quite reasonably, what exactly it thought it was doing. The moment was captured on camera and instantly became one of the most shared royal clips of the year. It was light-hearted. It was human. And for a prince who has spent years being characterized in the press as brooding, wounded, or combative, it was exactly the kind of coverage his team would have wanted. The meeting nobody was supposed to talk about. But quietly, in the middle of all this, before the goats, before the wheelchair rugby, something else had happened. Something far more carefully guarded. According to multiple reports, Harry, Meghan, and their 2 children travelled to Highgrove House, King Charles's private residence in Gloucestershire, for a reunion with the King and Queen Camilla. For Charles, it was reportedly the first time in around 4 years that he had properly seen his grandchildren. Buckingham Palace's public response was about as minimal as it gets. The palace confirmed only that the meeting had taken place. No further comment. No photographs. No description of what was discussed, how it went, or how long it lasted. For a moment, it seemed like both sides had actually managed something almost unheard of in the world of the Windsors: total, disciplined silence. It didn't last. The leak. Sources described as being close to the Sussexes began speaking to the American outlet Vanity Fair, offering a surprisingly detailed account of what was supposed to be an entirely private encounter. According to these sources, the meeting lasted around an hour and was, in their words, completely cloak and dagger, orchestrated by the king himself. One insider went further, telling the outlet that the meeting had been kept top secret, that nothing had been shared beforehand, no photographs, no details, and that the arrangement had specifically been agreed before the family sat down together. The same source suggested that pulling off that level of secrecy was something the Sussexes camp was, in their words, delighted about. Read that back, and you can spot the problem immediately. In the very act of insisting how secret and successful the secrecy had been, the details of the secret meeting were being handed to a major international magazine. The length of the meeting. The mood. The King's personal role in orchestrating it. All of it, supposedly off the record, and all of it now in print. Social media reaction was swift and, frankly, merciless. Commentators pointed out the obvious irony: a meeting described as having zero leaks was itself the subject of a fairly detailed leak. Others suggested that whatever trust had been rebuilt in that one quiet hour at Highgrove had already started eroding within days. The public reaction split largely along familiar lines, though even some of Harry and Meghan's more sympathetic observers seemed uneasy this time. Critics pointed to what they saw as a pattern: years of public complaints about royal privacy violations, followed by carefully sourced information making its way to friendly outlets whenever it suited the Sussexes' narrative. To them, this looked like more of the same: a family that demands discretion from others while apparently struggling to practice it themselves. Others were more sympathetic, noting that sources close to a person doesn't necessarily mean that person authorized the leak at all. Palace insiders, journalists, security staff, even outer circles of friends can all describe themselves as being close to a story without direct involvement from Harry or Meghan themselves. But regardless of who was actually responsible, the optics were undeniably bad. And they landed at a particularly sensitive moment, because this wasn't the first time secrecy, or the lack of it, had shadowed this family's attempts to communicate privately. Royal commentators have long referenced concerns reportedly held by the late Queen Elizabeth II about family conversations being recorded without full awareness, in the run-up to the Sussexes' Netflix documentary series. Whether or not every detail of those concerns has ever been fully confirmed, the broader anxiety they represent, that private royal moments have a habit of resurfacing publicly, clearly hasn't gone away. If anything, this new leak revived exactly that fear. To understand why this matters so much, you have to understand how central trust is to the monarchy's entire operating model. The British royal family functions, in large part, on discretion. Disagreements happen behind palace walls constantly, between siblings, between generations, between institutions and individuals. What has traditionally kept the system stable is an unwritten rule: whatever happens in private, stays in private. Grievances get managed quietly, through intermediaries, through carefully worded statements, through silence. Harry and Meghan's departure broke that rule spectacularly, publicly, repeatedly, and on a global media stage. That's precisely why reconciliation has been so difficult. It isn't just about repairing personal relationships, it's about whether the family can trust that private conversations will actually remain private going forward. This is also, reportedly, at the heart of Prince William's continued distance from his brother. Where King Charles appears willing to prioritize keeping some kind of door open, perhaps out of a father's instinct, perhaps out of an awareness of his own health and mortality, William is said to remain far more guarded, still deeply affected by the public claims made about his wife during the Sussexes' most combative years. So when a meeting billed as completely secret ends up detailed in a major magazine within days, it isn't just an embarrassing news cycle. For a family functioning on the currency of discretion, it's a direct hit to the very thing reconciliation depends on. Publicly, both sides appear to be sticking to their positions. Buckingham Palace has offered nothing beyond its brief initial confirmation. There has been no royal statement addressing the Vanity Fair report directly, no denial, no clarification. For Harry and Meghan, the broader trip appears to have been, on balance, a success. The Invictus Games coverage was overwhelmingly positive. The goat yoga clip alone likely reached more casual viewers than almost anything else connected to the Sussexes in recent memory. And crucially, the reunion with Charles, whatever its imperfections, did happen. The grandchildren did, reportedly, spend time with their grandfather for the first time in years. But the leak has undeniably added a new layer of tension to an already fragile process. Every future private meeting will now carry an implicit question: will this one actually stay private? And that question doesn't just apply to journalists or palace aides, it applies, uncomfortably, to Harry and Meghan's own circle as well. Whether this was a genuine misstep by well-meaning associates, a deliberate bit of narrative management, or something else entirely, one thing seems clear: rebuilding trust with the institution Harry and Meghan left behind will require more than just showing up for a quiet hour at Highgrove. It will require proving, consistently, over time, that quiet can actually stay quiet. A father and son who hadn't properly reunited in years finally sat down together, along with a mother and two young grandchildren the king had barely had the chance to know. For 1 hour, behind closed doors, it seemed like something had genuinely shifted. And then, almost as quickly as it happened, the details of that private hour became public property anyway, not through a palace leak, not through a long-lens photograph, but reportedly through people close to the very couple who insisted on secrecy in the first place. It's a small moment, in some ways. One meeting. One magazine story. But it captures something much bigger about the ongoing Sussex saga, the gap between what Harry and Meghan say they want, privacy, peace, a real relationship with the family they left, and the way information about their lives keeps finding its way into the press regardless. The monarchy, many royal watchers argue, would be stronger with Harry, Meghan, and their children playing some kind of role in it again. The affection the public showed during this trip, for the wheelchair rugby, for the goats, for that hug with Alison Hammond, proves there's still real goodwill out there waiting to be tapped. But goodwill alone won't rebuild trust. That will take something rarer from this family, a private moment that actually stays private. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the royal family's most complicated relationship, make sure to hit that like button. It genuinely helps this channel keep making videos like this one. And if you haven't already, subscribe, because we cover breaking royal stories like this every single week. Now I want to hear from you. Do you think Harry and Meghan can ever truly rebuild trust with the royal family, or is the damage from the last few years simply too deep? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next video.